We belong to Christ and we followers of Christ. So in early church in Antioch, the followers of Christ were called Christians for the first time. That's what Acts says. So the very term, when we call ourselves Christian, it basically means we follow Christ. And Christ himself has asked us to follow him. Okay, multiple times, about 21 times in the Bible say, follow me, follow me. One of the areas time we have said is in John, when he speaks about I'm the shepherd and you're the sheep, in John 10. If you look John 10, verse 4, when he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them. Right? Jesus goes ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. So if we are to say that Jesus is our shepherd and Jesus is our leader, and then we are as sheep are to follow him in every way, follow him in the things that he has asked us to follow him in the way he led his life in this world, the way he carried himself, the way he conducted the ministry, the way he loved people. So we are to follow him. And over the years of being a Christian, we have been looking at different aspects on to how to follow him. All right, how to follow him in his love, how to follow him in his compassion, in not loving money, forgiveness, and so on and so forth. Today we're going to look at one aspect as to how can we follow him. All right, if we are to follow, say that promise, actually, he says, the sheep, I will protect the sheep. Right, I will protect the sheep. The sheep is mine as long as they follow me. So that's the promise. So are we the sheep in his fold? Do we follow him? And if we follow him, in what aspects do we follow him? One of the things he says to follow, for us to follow, if we go to John, okay, if we go to John 8, right? So one of the things Jesus did while he was on this earth is John 8:29. Let's look at one aspect where we can follow him. The one, so 8:29. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone. We just saw he will never leave us alone. Jesus says his Father has never left him alone. Okay, never left him alone. Why didn't he leave him alone? Why? Because I always do what pleases him. Even as he spoke, many believed in him. So he's saying, right, the Bible says, as a Father did to Jesus, he will do it to us as well. Right? And Jesus says, never once Father left him alone. Right? Never alone. He never left him alone. Why? Because he always chose to please his Father in heaven. Right? So if we are not to be left alone, and if we are to follow Christ, then one thing we need to get our head around is to how to please our Father in heaven. In whatever we do, he says, not once or twice, he says, I always do what pleases my Father in heaven. Right? So there are twofold promises. One, if we are not to be left alone or not to be forsaken, right? And if we want to follow Christ, two things. So to fulfill these two things, we have to do one thing, that is to please the Father in heaven. Now, when it comes to pleasing something or pleasing someone, you could do it for various different reasons. Various different reasons. I'm reminded of one guy who did his nursing degree with a fellowship or with the help of a Western organization. I don't know if I told this before. Okay, I'll tell this again. There's quite a few new people here. So he was my student. So this organization had a local coordinator in Chennai. So they gave him money and said, look, recruit students from the poorest of the poorest in India. Pay them all the fees, pay them accommodation, pay them food. If they need to go to tuition, pay that as well. Pay everything. For 4 years, let them study worry free. All right. These are the students who can't afford anything in life, like basic food and accommodation, and forget about the fees. All right. So the job of this coordinator is to get hold of these kids from the poorest background, or pick these people from poorest background, put them in the college. And I had a chance to teach one of these students. Now, the only thing that the organization wanted back from the student is to give back to poor people 1 year of their life. Right after getting the degree, all they have to do is to go and serve in one of their hospitals in the remote parts of India for 1 year, for which they'll be given accommodation, food, and everything. Minimum salary, not as you get outside. So this boy did 4 years. When it came to final year, all right, after the final year fees have been paid, in the last 3 months, he came out of the hostel and broke the contract and said, I'm not going to be with you anymore. All right? After enjoying all the privileges for 4 years. So the hostel warden met me. And one of the things he said to me was, you see, this boy was such a lovely boy. He would do everything I asked him to do. He would cook. If I asked him to cook, he would do it. If I ask him to wash some clothes, he will wash it. Clean the hostel, he will do it. He did everything to please me, and I loved him as well. All right. But when it comes to the final year, when everything was sorted, now he doesn't want to serve that 1 year in the remotest part of India. He wants to go abroad. So he wants to break it, go get some money, and then do his own stuff. So the thing that led him to please this organization or please this warden is for his selfish ambition. Right? All he wanted was the money that the organization gave, the comfort that the organization gave. Therefore, he decided to please the warden from which this favor he was receiving. This is how most human beings are. And I've seen with my own eyes boys and sometimes girls who come to study. As long as they need something from their parents, they will be very obedient, right? Very obedient, pleasing to the parents. The moment they start leaving the house or start earning money, in India especially, you see their attitude changes completely to their parents. They don't care about parents anymore. They just leave them. The same person who pleased their parents until they had their own standing, and then they decide to completely off-go their parents. They were just pleasing not out of love for their parents, but it is out of the necessity, the selfish ambition they were pleasing the parents. You see that a lot, right? So you could please somebody for two reasons. One, to fulfill your own selfish ambition, or you could do it out of love. Okay? Now, Jesus here is saying, I pleased my Father. You know what was his attitude? If you go to Philippians, it tells you how what was this attitude behind his pleasing his Father. Philippians 2. Let me read the first few verses. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one spirit and one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, right? Don't do things with selfish ambition and selfishness. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. In your relationship with one another, have the same mindset as Christ. What did Christ do? Who, he being very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking up the very nature of servant, being made human likeness, and being found in the appearance of the man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to Father until death, even death on the cross. See, he was pleasing the Father not because of his selfish ambition. It is because out of Father's love for Father and the love for humanity, he decided to please his Father. In other words, he decided to obey his Father's command. See, the same thing happens in Gethsemane as well. You see, he really doesn't want to take this cup, right? He wanted to, but at the same time, he had this pull of not. But then he says, Father wants it. That's why he came. He says, I always pleasing the Father. Now, how can I not please the Father now? So he decides and says, Father, it's not my will, it's your will. Let me please you. Let me choose to please you. Right? Although my flesh doesn't want to at some point, because of the love I have for you and the humanity, let me choose to please you in this matter. This is very important. The reason I say this is because we as Christians, when we say that we please God by coming to church or reading Bible or whatever we do, we need to weigh this up in a balance to see, is that because of my selfish ambition, because I want to get good career, because I want to get good health, because I want to do well in my life, because I want my family to do well? Is that why we please God? Or is it for the love of God I please, and therefore the accessories that comes with it, the additional thing that comes with it is safety, security, happiness, joy. These are all additional one, extra, or cherry on the cake. Or is it the main thing I follow Christ for? Going back to that example, see, if he had served that organization with love and affection for what they are doing in his life, the external thing would be he would get everything he wanted. But actually, if you flip it, he is there not for the love of the organization, but he is there for his own selfish ambition. He managed to get that, but then the motive is very different. So this is what is very important. So when we decide to please God, when we decide to follow God, it need not to be, it should not be, or it must not be due to selfish ambition. And even when you please each other, when husband pleases their wife, the wife pleases husband, parents pleases children, children pleases. Nothing should be of selfish ambition. That is the base. All right? It should be the base. Now, why should we please God? What are the benefits of pleasing God? Or what do we as Christian enjoy when we please God? Right? Remember, whatever I'm going to say now shouldn't be based on your selfish ambition. You shouldn't please God because you're going to get all these things. You please God because you love Him. As a result, you will get these things. And then we will also look how to please God before we end. Okay, let's go to Ecclesiastes 2:26. உன்னத பாட்டு 2வது அதிகாரம் 26வது வசனம். So Ecclesiastes 2:26. To the person who pleases God, okay, to the person who pleases Him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. Okay, to the person who pleases Him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, He gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. Right? This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So to the person who pleases God, He gives 4 things. 1, wisdom, knowledge, happiness, and wealth. Okay? Wealth from sinners. So if you are seeking for wisdom is more than, like, it's not knowledge, right? Wise wisdom is your ability to get the right answers and deal with situations in a way that is wise. Okay, so not if you lack knowledge, whether it is spiritual knowledge or worldly knowledge, or whether you lack happiness. And as we sang, if you're lonely and you're not happy and you're miserable and you're finding it hard to be happy, joy of the Lord is not in you, the happiness and the joy is not in you, then think about it. Are you really in the matter of pleasing God? Do you really please God? We'll come to that, how to please God, later. Secondly, Proverbs 16:17. If a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, He causes their enemy to make peace with them. I think in Tamil it goes something like this. ஒருவனுடைய வழிகள் கர்த்தருக்கு பிரியமானதா இருக்குமானால் அவனுடைய எதிரிகளும் நண்பர்களாவார்கள். அப்படிதானே பிரதர் எழுதியிருக்கு? What is it? Do you have Tamil Bible? Tamil இருக்கா? Proverbs 16:7. நீதிமொழிகள் 16:7. Even your enemies. So if your ways, if the way you live pleases God, okay, many years ago God spoke to me clearly with these verses. When somebody was really against me, okay, this is going back about 15 or 16 years ago, there was someone who was working against me, really evil, working against me. So when I brought that to God, this is how God responded. He said, first of all, you live a life that is pleasing before my eyes. Then I'll make those enemies come in favor of you. Don't come and complain to me as to why they are your enemies. The ways, if someone comes against you, when somebody is working really against you, they are scheming plans against you, they are trying to trip you out, they are trying to backstab you, they're not interested in your welfare, right? Enmity against you, they're hell-bound in making your life harder. this is what God spoke to me. And that's exactly what happened. We said, first, you live a life that's pleasing in front of me, and then see what happens to the enemies, how they turn around and come in favor of you. Yeah. So I said, yes, Lord, I'll do that. All right. Tell me what pleases you. And then that changed. Situation completely changed. Within, if I'm not wrong, 3 months, completely changed situation. Okay. So that's another promise for people who pleases God. Wisdom, knowledge, happiness, wealth, and enemies will make peace with you. 1 John 3:21. 1 John 3:21. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from Him anything we ask, because we keep His commands and do what pleases Him. All right? He says we'll receive from Him anything we ask. Our prayers are answered. We ask something, sometimes it doesn't get answered, right? It just doesn't, God seems to be quiet. But John writes, says, if our conscience is clear, number one, we will receive from Him anything we ask because of two things. One, we keep His commands, right? And do what pleases Him. In other words, we go to Bible, He tells us what to do, and then we do it. And that pleases Him. We do what pleases Him. If we do that, then we receive what we ask for. Obviously, based on His will. Okay? So, answered prayers are to people who pleases God. If you decide to please Him, if your life pleases Him, if the way you conduct yourself pleases Him, the way you walk on this earth pleases Him, then you can be confident that your prayers will be answered. Okay? Galatians 1:10. Galatians 1:10. I think this is the most important thing in pleasing Him. Galatians 1:10. Am I trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I was still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. If you want to be a servant of Christ, wanting to do His work on this earth, you want to represent Him on this earth, all right? You should not please people. You should only please God. So if you please God, right, then you can be the servant of God. There is no way you don't please God and be servant of God. Okay, so this is basically giving two contrasts here, Paul. He says, like, I have two choice in whatever I do. When I come and present the truth to you, I have two choice. One, I could speak in a way that pleases you, which will make you happy, which will make you kind of, elated. And I have another choice to please God. Sometimes that can hurt you, sometimes that can make you happy too. And he says, when I come to you, I have to do what pleases God. I can't just do what pleases you. Okay? So, and that goes when you want to advise your children, same thing, same is true. When you speak to your partner, same is true. When you speak to anyone, the same is true. You can either please them by just giving false hope, or you could tell them the truth what and please God and stand for the truth. So one thing, if you really want to serve Christ in whatever form, in Sunday school or youth ministry, or you want to, worship, or whatever it is, in your house, uh, ministering to the children, or in the streets, whatever ministry you do, you cannot please man. You have to please God. Then you can be called a servant of God. Don't ever forget that. And that's one of the big, huge privilege God gives. Okay. So now we have looked at, and these are the things that, these are the areas where God spoke to me in the past about pleasing Him. So I picked it. Probably there are quite a lot which I've left because God hasn't dealt with me. All right. Maybe I didn't go through the situation. So these are the places where I can remember where God setting me right and asking me to please Him and not to please anything else. Okay? So what do you get? You get knowledge, wisdom, all right, joy, happiness, and wealth, right? And then you have your enemies will become friendly to you. Your prayers are answered. Then also you will become a servant of God. You see, this is therefore it is very important that we decide to please God. Let me go back to what I said earlier. We don't please God because we are getting all these things. We are pleasing God because we love Him. The byproduct of all these things is this. So, in other words, if you don't have any of this, if you don't have peace, if your friends, if your enemies are still enemies, ask yourself this question. Go back to the initial question. Am I really loving God and pleasing Him in whatever I do? If the answer is no, then you need to set that right. The rest will fall in place. So these are, like, if you like, it's byproduct or symptoms of a problem, right? In medicine, there are symptoms. We don't deal with symptoms. Sometimes we deal with symptoms temporarily, but with any treatments, the main goal, or the goal or objective is not to treat the symptoms, it's to treat the condition itself. Okay. So don't try to deal with the symptoms. If someone is having enmity against you, don't fight with them, right? Don't just keep on arguing with them. Look at where it's coming from. You go back to God and say, Lord, you said that my enemies will, become friendly with me. What is the problem? Am I not pleasing you enough? Show me where I'm not pleasing you. Then God will show you. Lord, I'm not having knowledge. I'm not having wisdom. I just blabber and speak unnecessary things and hurt people. I'm not having wisdom. There people are asking me questions, but I'm not able to answer these questions. I don't have wisdom. Where is the problem? Go back to the main thing. All right. My finances are dwindling. Where is the problem? Go back to the main issue. I'm not serving you enough. I'm not serving you effectively. Where is the problem? Go back to the brain. So these are the symptoms, if you like. But if you please God, then the rest of this will become true in our life. Right. Now, let me how do we please Him? Let's go to Matthew 3. Matthew 3. 17. Okay, Matthew 3:17. Here, Jesus goes to, anyway, the Father from heaven declares, and the voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." I'm quite pleased with my Son. Right? Why did he say that? If you go back a couple of verses up, it says, Jesus replied, okay, John says, let's read that. So Matthew 3, let's read from 13. Okay. Then Jesus came from Galilee to Jordan to be baptized by John. It's a bit far walk actually. If you think where Galilee is and where Jordan is, it's a bit of walk. But John tried to deter him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" And look what Jesus says: "Let it be so now. It's proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness." Then John consented. So he's saying, look, Father has commanded that we have to be baptized, right? So baptism. So let's do it. Let's do it because it pleases him. Right? Let's obey what he has said. This is the right thing to do. So let's do. Let it be so. It's proper for us to do to fulfill all righteousness. So let's obey this command from above. Let's do the right. Let's fulfill it. Okay. There is a command. There is a question. There is an ask from us. Let's do that. Let me do that. And once he obeys, and then John consented, as soon as Jesus was baptized, went out of water, at the moment heaven was open and saw the Spirit come down, and the voice from the heaven says, "This is my son, I am well pleased." Actually, Zach Poonen expands this a little more. He says something like this, which kind of opened my eyes too. You see, if you read about it, only sinners came to baptize. If you read about it, right? Only people who repented of the sin came to get baptism from John, right? So the fact that you come for baptism means you are agreeing that you are sinning, right? That's what it is. And to do that publicly is almost a humiliation, really. Right? Only people who had the humility to do that came. The Pharisees, only few came, and then John had to even rebuke them. So if you are coming publicly saying that I want to be baptized, John says repent and then baptize. So when you say repent, it means you are agreeing that I've sinned before all this group of people. And Jesus already had a following. Jesus and his disciples, Jesus and his followers, they are the one who came, right, to Jordan. Now Jesus says, okay, I will humble myself, even though I haven't sinned, because I had to set an example for others to follow. I will humble myself and pretend, or let me identify myself with other sinners and go down to do baptism. You see, this is where obedience comes. You see, sometimes we are faulted by, say, somebody had done something against us. It is our right to say, look, he has done something wrong, right? It's a right to say he is the one who needs to really ask forgiveness. That's the righteous thing to do. But then the Bible says, forgive everyone, forgive those who have trespassed against you. All right. So now the question is, do we say I am judicially right, therefore I will not ask forgiveness, they are the one who has done something wrong? Or do we go and say, look, I know there's something wrong, let me ask forgiveness, let's patch up, Bible has said we need to love each other. All right. Love, it says love forgives multitudes of sin. So therefore I choose to love you, even though in your heart you think you haven't done anything wrong. You still go there and speak to that person and say, look, forgive me in case if I've done anything wrong. Do you do that? If we choose to do that, like Jesus had done, even though he didn't have to do baptism, he did, because baptism is for repentance and baptism. He didn't have to really do it, but he did it because the command says so, because he wants to set an example for others. Do we as a Christians do that? That pleases Father. That's why he's saying, this is son, I'm well pleased in this son, because he hasn't sinned, and he is willing to identify with other sinners, publicly declaring that he has sinned while he hasn't really. Why is he doing that? Is because to please me. He just wanted to follow my command and show others that this is the right thing to do. That is the heart that Father is pleased with. Even though we haven't sinned, okay, in the heart, we should not have any enmity against anyone. Okay, so sometimes you just do things that may because God has commanded it, you do it anyway. Okay, even though it is not right. uh, you may have sometimes it is probably right that you don't speak to them, but just forget about it because God commanded us to do so. Now that's, and if you go to Luke 2:51, one of the reason why again then Luke 2:51, we know this incident. All right, he went down to Nazareth with them, with Mary and Joseph, and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus grew in wisdom. Remember the wisdom? Wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. Right? Why he doesn't need to really to be obedient to Joseph and Mary. He decided to do it because Bible says, honor your father and mother, be obedient to your father and mother. And Jesus basically, even though he's son of God, he's basically obeying the commands of his father. Okay, so by staying obedient to his earthly father and mother, he's obeying his heavenly father's command that obey your dad and mom. Right? When he does that, all right, that finds favor, that pleases father, that pleases the father, and therefore he grows in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. So if we say we are following God, if you're saying we want to follow him and we want to please him, one of the things is obey his commands, even though it sometimes doesn't make sense, even though it is beyond the judicial, earthly judicial thing. Forgive, for an example, forgiveness. All right, forgive everybody. He says, well, actually, you don't. If you look at uh, the worldly judicial system, you don't really have to forgive people who have done something evil against you. The real thing is you can't take them to court and get them punished. That's what the real judicial system is based on. But Jesus says, it was written that you take one eye for another eye, but I say forgive those who trespass against you, those who do evil against you. Now, when we do that, that really pleases God. Really pleases God. Okay. So, following his command, even though you are in the right, that really pleases him. Why? Because you have forgone your rights just to obey him. And do you think he will let you down? Definitely not. He will make your enemies, whoever done something against you, will come to you and started supporting you at some point. Okay, so it's all about looking at the commands and saying, I will follow you no matter what. Okay, that's exactly what Jesus. So Jesus decided to obey Father even though it didn't make sense for people around him. I don't make say it doesn't make sense to me that he went in to take baptism. Baptism is not for people who haven't sinned. Baptism is for people who have sinned. You repent and then you get baptized. What was he repenting from? Nothing. He didn't have to repent from anything because he was sinless. Yet he was baptized because Father says this is the right thing to do. That's why he's saying this is the right thing to do. Let me do it. Let me set an example for others to follow. All right. By doing so, he's really humbling himself. He's identifying with sinners, which is a very humble thing to do because people are looking up to him as a teacher. and he says, okay, I'll do that because that's the right thing to do. Whatever is the right thing to do, if you decide to do the right thing, no matter what it is, it could hurt you, it could sometime, it's not, uh, you know the, there are a lot of no win no fee, what is that, the solicitors everywhere, who with even a little thread, if they have, they will take the people to court and get a lot from them, right? We need to really be careful. Ask ourselves this question, right? Am I in right? Although I'm right, but is that the right thing to do? Is God asking me to forgive that person or forego that person? All right. Or do we stick to saying, like, this is my right, this is my right to do so, okay, this is my right to stay silent, this is my right to not forgive them, it's my right to get the money from them, all those things. You need to be really be careful, and may God speak to us, and if we keep our conscience clear, God will start speaking to us. Okay, secondly, John 8:25. How can we please God? By staying obedient like Jesus did. Secondly, John 8:25 onwards. Let me read. So now to Jesus they are asking, who are you? They asked. Just what I have been telling you from the beginning, Jesus replied. I have much to say in judgment of you, but he who sent me is trustworthy, and what I have heard from him I tell to the world. They did not understand that he was telling them about his Father. So Jesus said, when you have lifted the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak what the Father has taught me. The one who sent me is with me. He has not left me alone, for I always do what pleases him. Even as he spoke, many believed in him. Now, what he is saying is in 28, so Jesus said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own, but speak just what Father has taught me. What does that tell? It tells me about Jesus, the, the, the fellowship he had. Right? He's basically saying, anything I do, anything I speak, the instructions I always get from him, and then I do. Okay, the fellowship I have. So if I want to pick the 12 disciples, I go to him and ask him for help. All right. If I want to uh, bring Lazarus back to life, I don't just rush into it. I wait. I ask God before I do that. Before I speak to these Nicodemus, I wait and ask for help. Before I identify Zacchaeus, I wait. Everything I do, all right. First, he goes to the marriage in Cana. He decides not to help, and then he decides to help. And when he goes to Jerusalem, initially when his brothers called him, he said, I am not coming, and then he decides to go. What does that show? Initially refusing and then taking it, initially not going, then going. It basically is waiting for Father to give him permission to do these things. All right. He goes there, and he goes to Jericho. He finds Zacchaeus. All right. All these things is basically waiting for command from above. This is very, very important. Unless you have a very close fellowship with God, it is impossible to come to this life. He's basically saying, the reason why my Father is so pleased with me is because I don't do anything without asking him. Is that our a story? Is that what we do in our lives? Right? Is that what you and me do? Before you take any decision, do you go to Father and say, Lord, help me? Before I prepare this sermon, do I go to God and say, Lord, you need to help me here, I don't know what I'm speaking? Or before you take on a course, or you take on a job, or you start deciding something in your life, do you go back to God and say, Lord, show me what's your will? Shall I do this or do not do this? Can you send some help to guide me, right? Or can you give me some verse that would help me to understand the right path? Do you, please help me to please help my parents to guide me in the right direction, or please, Lord, show me, bring some godly people into my life to show me the right direction, or give me that spiritual intuition that I need to, whatever you do, whether you're buying a house, whether you, whatever you do, buying a car or whatever, ask God for the direction. That's what Jesus is saying. The reason, I always do what pleases him. The reason is I do nothing on my own, but speak just what Father has taught me. So whatever I am teaching, right, whatever I am doing, I'm basically waiting for instructions from my Father. That kind of fellowship is so important if we have to please God. Right? If we approach God with a true heart to know what He really wants us to do, okay, listen to this very carefully. If our true, genuine interest or genuine wish is to do what He really wants to do, then He will somehow make it clear to us. But if we have a vested interest, if we have an interest on something and ask God to direct us towards that interest, it may not happen. He may not direct us. But if we keep our options open and say, Lord, whether you give me this or you don't give me this, whether you open this door or don't open this door, I don't really mind. But open the right door for me. That whichever you want me to go into, that open that for me. If we keep that prayer before us, somehow He'll do that for us. Okay, so that's very important. So not according to my will, but thy will. Okay, your will, like your will be done. Sometimes it can be a little painful as well. Sometimes he might inflict some pain in your body. Sometimes he might stop you in your track. I've seen this early in my Christian life. Something drastically he will do in our body. Something drastically he might do in my job, workplace, which rattles me, which kind of shakes me to the core. But if you're willing to please him, at the end, everything will be fine. But while he is rattling us, while he is ruffling up, the question is, whom do we turn to? Do we run to him and say, Lord, I looks like you're telling me something. Looks like you want to get my attention. What do you want me to do? If we keep on doing that, he will always send us in the right direction. You see that the young son, the younger son, yeah, not the elder one, the prodigal son. You see, if God didn't love him, okay, if God didn't love him, he would have sent somebody to help him there. He wouldn't have struggled. All right, if imagine that young son had another in his crisis, if he had a rich man supporting him in that city, do you think he would have come back to father? He wouldn't have. He wouldn't have, would he? He would have been happily living in the sin for the rest of the life. All right? But if you are a son or a daughter of God, you will go through those struggles if you are away from him, and to bring you back into the right direction. So if we choose the wrong path, sometimes we might get into this kind of trouble. So the question is, do you have that close fellowship with him and tell him, Lord, whatever you wish, I'm going to do in my life. If you are away from his will, would you allow him to punish you a little bit to bring you back? I've said many times that prayer. Lord, I don't care if you inflict me pain. Please do, because Bible says He will not test us beyond our ability, right, to bear. So I know that He won't do that. To the ability, whatever you want to do it, but bringing me back into the right direction. The reason is our flesh is so powerful. Sometimes we want things that is beyond His will. Our flesh is so hell-bound to get certain things like honor, like praise, like money, like, these things can be quite a pull, right? But if we have that prayer, say, Lord, all I want to do is what you want to do in my life. Okay. The career sometimes might look very lucrative, right? Like, the not paying tax is so tempting because you get so much money in your bank, and you could do a lot with that money, right? You could go on holidays, you could do that. But the question is, do your conscience will keep on telling what you're doing is wrong. So if you listen, then that's fine. If you don't listen, and if you're a child of God could punish you and bring you back to that position. So here Jesus is saying, I always do what pleases Him. If you and me can say that, which is quite a hard thing to say, especially with the flesh we have. But Jesus, even though He had the same flesh as you and me, He says, I always do what pleases Him. Why? Because He's saying, He tells me everything and I just follow it. Simple as that. Okay. But for us, it may not be as simple as that. But our prayer should be always that. Say, Lord, I want to do what you want me to do. Every aspect of my life, simple things to big things, right? If you say even little things, I want to do what pleases you. Big things, I want to do please you. How do we do that? That close fellowship. That is what is important. Always speaking to God. Every day morning when you get up, just say, Lord, I don't know what is ahead of me, but I want to please you. I want to follow what is your will in my life. Right? The way I speak to my faculty, the students, or the patients, or wherever you go, what I want to do your will. Right? I don't want to go away from my will. Can you protect me? Can you bring me back? If I am going away from your will, can you bring me back? That could hurt, but I'm happy to do that. All right. And when he punishes you, you be glad, because He considers you to be you sons. Yeah, that's what Bible says. Be glad when you're punished, because He's considering you to be children of Him. All right. If He doesn't, then it basically means you're not His children. If you're His children, if you're a son, if you're a daughter, then punishment should be taken happily. I've rejoiced in certain punishment. I've been punished as well, but I've rejoiced, because that shows that He's interested in my welfare. That shows that He wants me to come back, right? So rejoice in it. So the other thing to please Him is to do, to stay very close with Him, to know what He wants you to do. Okay, so the first thing is, what we said was, first thing is obedience. Second thing is to have a close fellowship. Always keep speaking to Him to find His will. Always speak to Him to know what He wants you to do. Third thing, Hebrews 11:6. And without faith, it is impossible to please God. 11:6. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to Him must believe that He exists, and He rewards those who earnestly seek Him. Okay, so that kind of faith is so important. Okay, because He says, Bible says, you might have fellowship, you might be close with Him, you might go to church, you might read Bible, you might do prayer, whatever you want to do, you can do. But He's saying it's impossible. Right? It's impossible to please God without having faith in him. It's almost like you insult him if you don't have faith in him. That's what he means, right? So how, you know, what is faith? And again he explains it. All right, he says he need to, those who come to him, all right, anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Sometimes we, when we earnestly seek him, we may feel like things are not happening, right? Things are not happening. It's the same thing, same prayer I'm praying, same time in church, but not, situations are not moving, right? I can't see any hope. I can't see things changing. This is where faith comes in, right? Faith comes in there. He said these are the things that you cannot see. All right, faith is, let's go to 1:11:1. All right, Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope. We hope for something to happen in our life. It's a confidence we have, in what we hope, an assurance about what we do not see. All right, we don't see certain things happening in our life yet, right? We don't know what holds in 2026 or later part of 2025 or 27. We don't know, but we have faith that God is going to lead us, right? Because I am his child. He says, I will not leave you, not forsake you. So that's the promise. So it is that having faith in that kind of promise, right? He will not leave me no matter what happens. The situation may feel like he's leaving me. He's not, I'm forsaken, but I have faith that he won't leave me, not forsake me, right? Now, gives a lot of example of this in Hebrews 11. And one of the example I think we have discussed multiple times is the example of Abraham and Sarah, right? They were confused, like, what are you talking? Look at the number of times Abraham get confused. You say you're going to make me big, you say you're going to make my descendants rule this country and all those things. You did that at the age of 75. I'm 85, nothing is happening. 10 years, I've given you 10 years to fulfill that thing. You haven't done it. And then he goes back and says, can I make Eliezer the descendant? God says no. Then he goes to uh, Ishmael. He says, can I make Ishmael my descendant? God says no. And then it comes to a point where it's very, very vividly written in Genesis. If you go to Genesis, okay, Genesis, let's go to 18. Let's go to 18. 18:12. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out. It's not Abraham, by the way, it's Sarah, right? It's Sarah saying. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old. He's saying worn out means what? I'm done. I'm done, worn out, and my Lord is old. Will will I now have the pleasure? Then it's basically saying I am done. Oh, okay. Actually, 11. Read 11 onwards. Abraham and Sarah was already very old. Sarah was past the age of childbearing, so Sarah laughed. Actually, she's basically saying I'm done. It's completely gone. But Abraham had that faith. Abraham said, God will still do it, because he told us he will still do it. Okay. So Sarah is worn out, means his womb is blocked, and Abraham's ability to bear child is done. All this done, but God still did it at the age of 100. And Bible records Abraham had that faith. If you go to 11, all right, 11:12, Hebrews 11:12. Okay, 8 onwards, let's read. By faith, Abraham, when called to go, he did that, yeah, and by faith, And look at 12. And so from one man as good as dead came descendants as numerous as the stars in sky and as countless as on seashore. Okay, and I think Brother Jacob used to mention that where multiple times through his testimony. And also look 17. By faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as sacrifice. Look at his faith. He says, even if I kill Isaac, all right, he gave me that Isaac. Even if I kill Isaac, he's able to bring back Isaac somehow. Therefore, I'm willing to kill Isaac. That sort of faith, right? Like hope that you can't see. You know, how would a dead person come back? All right, look at this man's faith. He said, I'm going to kill him. Okay, look exactly what he says. 17. By faith Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as sacrifice. He who has embraced the promise was about to sacrifice one of his only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offering will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned. What reason is there? Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and also in a manner to speak, he did receive Isaac back from dead. He's basically, while he's walking to that mountain, Mount Moriah, he's basically saying, well, you know, even if I kill, God is going to bring this guy back somehow. And he didn't have any precedents before. There's no precedents where dead people have come alive before Abraham. But Abraham says, well, you know, even if I kill, he'll come back. That sort of, I don't know. I mean, this is where faith comes in, right? The hope that things that hasn't happened before, never, no precedents, right? Never happened before, but God is able to do it because He has said so. All right. So this is what is faith. So faith is confidence in what we hope for. Do you hope? Do you hope because you come to God hoping that this is going to happen in your life? You approach God thinking that hope, we're having a hope that this is, you know, God, if God has promised, hope based on God's promise is important. Okay, so God promised you something and you hope that this is definitely going to happen, like Abraham. And he, no precedents before and no scientific explanation, no medical explanation, but still things will happen. That is faith. That is faith. And it is impossible to please God if we don't have this kind of faith. And that kind of peace is in some of the and what is the symptom of it? You will still feel happy, you will still feel be joy, you will still be comforted. You won't keep on be anxious thinking that is it going to happen, is this going to happen, is this going to happen. That shows that you're rested in faith. If God has promised you something, He'll definitely somehow do it. That's the faith we should have. And that's the faith Abraham had. That is the faith Moses had. That is the faith Joshua had. How is this Jericho wall going to crumbling down by just blowing the trumpet? What physics is behind it? Nothing. And I sometimes see these TV programs where they try to explain this God's doing by physics and science. It's beyond it. It's beyond it. It's beyond that, right? So don't try to explain these things with science, and God is beyond the scientific principle. So that is our hope. That is what pleases Him. All right. So the first, obedience. Second, having fellowship. Third, having faith. And let me tell you these two things, and then we'll finish. I think we'll go to Matthew 21. Matthew 21, 28. He's talking about these two sons. Okay. What do you think? There was a man who had two sons. He went to the first and said, son, go and work today in the vineyard. And this guy says, I will not. He answered. But later he changed his mind. So his initial mind was he's not going. Okay? Follow this. The initial mind said, don't go. All right? And then he changed his mind and he went. Then the father went to the other son and said the same thing. He answered, I will go, sir. But he did not go. He didn't change mind. You see, when he said, I will go, his mind was saying, I won't go. All right? And then he didn't go. It's not like he wanted to initially go and then change mind and not go. All right? He didn't say, I change. So one guy, it says he changed the mind. The other guy, he didn't change the mind. So the mind initially was, I'm not going. But he said, I'm going. And he did not go. Which of these two did what his father pleases or wanted? And everybody said, the first guy. You see, why? Why? The first guy actually said, I won't go. But God is still pleased with him because he changed his mind. Speaking the mind, being honest with God, right? That is very important. Not acting before God. If you have messed up, put a hand up and say, I have messed up. Lord, what I did was wrong. Help me to overcome this. And then if you have done something nasty, just say, I have done it. If you couldn't overcome certain things, just, Lord, I couldn't overcome this. Help me. Okay, later you could change your mind and become a good person. But when you are evil inside, don't pretend to God that you're a good person. That is very, very bad. All right? Being honest. Being honest, I think we spoke about it last time as well. Being honest and upfront with God, it's what pleases him. The guy who said, I won't go, ended up pleasing God. The guy who said, I will go, didn't please God. You see, this is important. Being honest, no matter what the situation is. Okay, and he, look what he says. Following that, he says, Jesus said to them, Matthew 21, 32. For John came to you to show you the way of righteousness, and you did not believe him, but the tax collectors and the prostitute did. Right? Why didn't Pharisees didn't do it? Why? Their own fault, so they couldn't select the way of righteousness. Being honest, no matter how bad it is, even prostitutes could take the way of righteousness. Even the tax collectors or any criminal could take the way of righteousness, as long as you're honest and speak the mind. These two sons, this is the thing. The one guy said, I will go, and he didn't go. All right, but he didn't change the mind. It's the same mind. Okay, he had it in his mind not to go, but he said he's going. But the other guy said, I'm not going, but his mind changed. And then he worked. So initially, both didn't want to go. That is the initial, that's the moral of the story. Both didn't want to go. All right, and one said the truth, one said it, one didn't say the truth. All right, the guy who said the truth changed the mind and went. Okay, so this is very important to know. So being righteous, that's what pleases God. And once you please God, all the things said in the Bible will come as a blessing to you. I think we'll stop there. I think we have seen enough. So pleasing God is one of the things in which area where we can follow Jesus Christ. Jesus said, I came to please my Father. Okay, so that's important. And we have listed out the things that God will bless us with if we please him. And how do we please him is important. One is obedience. All right, obey. Even though you're in the right path. Right? If he says forgive, forgive. All right, obey. Obedience is important. Second thing is having a close fellowship. Doing whatever he says. Right? Just follow his commands. So to do that, you need to keep on constantly hearing from him. If you haven't never heard from him through Bible, start reading the Bible. Ask him to speak to you. If you're making decisions in your life, ask, Lord, is that the right way to do it? All right? If he punishes you, brings you back, accept that. Thirdly, have faith. All right? Have faith like Abraham had. Even though situation may not look like it's all opening up, you may not have anything to believe. You don't have any signs to believe, but still believe. Like, all right? Like Elijah, there's no cloud, but he sees rain. All right, so even though you don't see things, believe that this will happen as long as God has promised you. All right. Fourth and finally, speak your mind. Be honest, no matter what. If you have messed up, just tell God, I messed up. If you do these things, you'll definitely please Him. Once you start pleasing Him, whatever the blessing we spoke on the earlier stage will come into pass. May God bless you and help you to please Him, and let your life, your family life, be a pleasing aroma to His throne now and forever. God bless.